Democratic Alliance is planning to lay criminal charges against the Higher Education Minister. I'm spotting Helen Zille, the party's DA Federal Chair, who's just arrived at the Cape Town police station. These are live visuals we're beaming to you ahead of that particular action, I should say. The DA, of course, really taking umbrage, really, to President Cyril Ramaphosa's decision to fire their Deputy Minister, Andrew Whitfield, and has since laid out a whole host of threats, I think I should say, including, of course, the fact that they are pulling out of the national dialogue, which is meant to help South Africa carve a way forward in dealing with its most contemporary issues. It seems there may be a quick word or two from Helen Zille, who is leading this particular action from the Democratic Alliance. It seems they're pretty much ready to speak. Let's listen in.
Hi, Lindsay.
Morning.
How are you all?
Good morning.
No, it's all right. Hi, everybody, and thanks for being here. Really, the person who should be addressing you now is Karabo Khachau. She is our representative on the Portfolio Committee for Higher Education, and this scandal was exposed by her work. She was away for the weekend, and she landed just now back in Cape Town, so she will be coming now, straight through from the airport. She will lay the actual charge, and she will answer your questions and address you afterwards. So I'm just a stand-in for Karabo, and I have my colleague here, Baxolile Nodada, that we affectionately know as Bax, who is the Deputy Chief Whip of the Democratic Alliance in the National Assembly. So he is here to back me up and to support me, and Karabo will be through as soon as her Uber brings her here. We're here today for the simple reason that President Ramaphosa refuses to be as good as his word and act against corruption, act against criminality in our parliament. Those kinds of actions go unchecked, whereas what President Ramaphosa perceives as a slight, which is a deputy minister not asking him permission to go on a private trip that he didn't have to ask permission for, that is punished in the most severe terms. But serious fraud and the Parliament is somehow condoned by President Ramaphosa's government. That is an enormous double standard, and that shows you that the ANC isn't at all interested in combating corruption. This matter concerns Minister Nkabane, the Minister of Higher Education. She announced certain appointments to the SETA boards, the Sector Education and Training Authorities, which are crucially important in the higher education sector of South Africa. Our colleague Karabo Khachau then went and did an entire table of everybody who was appointed and discovered, lo and behold, that there were a whole lot of deployed ANC cadres. So the next question, obviously, was to ask how were they selected? And the minister said it was by an independent board of experts. Now, when we dug a little bit further and found out who these experts were, 3 out of the 6 were employees of the minister in her own department, and several others were deployed ANC cadres from various positions, and I have them listed here. So far from being independent people who had come in as experts to make the appointments, we had the minister's chief of staff, we had a chief director for the SETAs, accountable to the minister, and we had the director of corporate services, who's very close to the minister. So she put 3 people who worked for her and 2 others, one of whom denied that that was his job afterwards, into choosing these critical roles for people who administer many tens of millions, supposedly in service of higher education in our country. And so that was a blatant lie to a committee of Parliament, which is considered to be a lie to Parliament. This was a blatant lie to Parliament and a misleading of Parliament. Now, that has been held in the past to be fraud, and lying to Parliament and fraud are 2 criminal contraventions. They are criminal contraventions. They are not just indiscretions or lack of consideration or perhaps disrespect, as some people believe has been shown to President Ramaphosa by our colleague Andrew Whitfield. What has been done by Minister Nkabane is fraud and misleading Parliament, both of which are criminal contraventions. Now, we obviously can't let that go. We can't let that ride, even though certain deployed cadres have quickly been withdrawn as part of the cover-up. We see what's going on, and we see just how much ANC ministers, to support and deploy ANC cadres, are prepared to put people who are accountable to themselves into positions that should be taken by people of extreme integrity and professional independence, mislead the entire setup, undermine it, to deploy ANC cadres, and then lie about it to Parliament. We obviously can't sit back and take that, and that is why we are laying formal charges. There are several precedents to this in South Africa's history, both during our democracy and before our democracy. Before our democracy, you will remember the information scandal. Most of you weren't born yet, but I was in your shoes because I was a journalist in Parliament covering the information scandal. And when it turned out that Connie Mulder, who was a minister then, had lied to Parliament, he was forced to resign. And when that lie could be linked to John Vorster, who was the president, the prime minister at that time, change of constitution in the meantime, of course, he was forced to resign as well from the presidency of the country. So it is very important to understand that even under apartheid, these infringements were considered so grave that a president and a minister of state were forced to resign because of a lie they committed to Parliament or even only knew had been made to Parliament. Tony Yengeni was found guilty of fraud for misleading Parliament, and that is where the precedent of a fraud contravention comes from. Tony Yengeni received a very high punishment. So even under Thabo Mbeki and others, lying to Parliament was not tolerated and should not be tolerated now. It is very important to understand that we have to, as the official opposition who's now part of government, but it's clear we have to continue our role as opposition in order to hold the ANC and the President accountable. We are here refusing to take the serious criminal act lying down. Max, would you like to say something?
Yes, thanks so much, Helen. Good morning, colleagues. I think what is most important from a parliamentary perspective is that we take lying to Parliament quite seriously, and there are various steps that we've already taken as a Democratic Alliance in Parliament. One, obviously, is to lay an ethics complaint within Parliament, which will be processed by Parliament. Our colleague Karabo Khakao has also laid a complaint with the public protector, but those processes can run their course. The fact of the matter here is that we're taking action because the president of the country, the president of the ANC, refuses to act on corrupt ministers and ministers that have been charged or alleged to be corrupt in their own departments. So it's important for us to take that step and to clean out government. That was part of the reason why we joined the government of national unity to begin with, is to make sure that we fight against corruption and cadre deployment, so that people that go into SETA boards that are responsible for developing skills of young people of South Africa, that some of them are behind me here, to make sure that they access economic opportunity, do so without them being prejudiced or being put aside because there's a way that is made through for ANC deployed cadres. So today we're here because there's precedent that has been set that lying to Parliament is actually defrauding individual members of Parliament and Parliament as an institution. And it's not something that we should take lightly, and it's something that we must act against if the President is not willing to act on that. So that is precisely why we're here today. And we're going to obviously be doing that and entering here to lay those charges. We've got those the affidavits drafted here with our colleague Karabo Khakao, which will be here at a later stage. So it's important for us to understand the reason why we're here and why this is so important. Because if we don't fight against corrupt ministers and ministers that deploy based on cadre deployment at the expense of SETA boards and young people that need to gain skills to access the economic opportunity, we will not be doing justice to why we joined the government of national unity to begin with, and also making sure that Parliament has teeth to make sure that it holds people accountable that provides things like misleading Parliament and lying to Parliament. So I think that's that on my side, and obviously we will engage you when Karaba's here and after we've laid our criminal charges.
Max, we seldom see the charges that you lay here amount to anything. What confidence do you have the police will take this further?
Look, one thing we must do after laying those criminal charges here is to make sure that we do a follow-up. And we've got a responsibility of doing that. And we've done follow-ups on various cases, as much as they may take a bit of time, but we've got a responsibility to make sure that as a part of the rule of law, we follow through with that. And make sure that the police do their job, and ultimately the prosecuting authorities do their job as well, to make sure that these cases of this nature and of this grave, serious nature are taken seriously. And we will be doing that, and we will be doing those follow-ups. And there are some cases that, by the way, have gone through, that we've laid through from here, and people ended up being held accountable, because it's our responsibility to do that, and that's the only way we can actually do it, through the rule of law and the police in laying those criminal charges.
The chairperson of the Education Committee last week and the Select Committee both said it was premature to determine that the minister had misled Parliament. Do you believe it's premature?
The minister released a public statement, basically withdrawing the fact that advocate that she claimed that she had appointed as part of the SETA boards actually did not play the role that she thought they had played. And the advocate themselves also released public statements that they were never part of that process. So in essence, she actually has conceded to the fact that she's lied to Parliament. And it is our responsibility to then take that up. It's not premature. It's blatant, it's there, she's written it. She's said it on numerous occasions inside the Portfolio Committee in Parliament to mislead Parliament and mislead individual members of Parliament about the panel that is set on SETA boards. Those are not individual, independent people, as all of you have now public knowledge of, that as exposed by our colleague Karabo Khakao. So it's not premature. It's defrauding defrauding actually, and ultimately misleading Parliament and lying to Parliament, and that's why we're here today.
When was the decision taken to lay criminal charges?
The decision was taken during the course of this week. This week, as you know, has been dominated by the outcry over a deputy minister going on a privately funded DA trip to Washington, D.C. And although he wrote to the president for permission, and the president never replied to him and hasn't to this day, and although he didn't have to apply for permission to go on this trip, he was fired as the deputy minister. But a whole minister lies to Parliament, does a cover-up to prevent people holding her to account for deploying cadres, and the president does absolutely nothing. And it's not premature. The documents are here. We know exactly who she appointed. We know exactly where they work and to whom they account. We know exactly who they appointed to the SETA boards. And we know that in a flurry of guilt, the minister quickly withdrew some of those appointments, which were then just part of the cover-up. There's nothing premature about it. The facts are all here, and they are set out in Karabo's affidavit, which she will submit when she lays the charges. The facts are on the table. The facts have never been clearer. But somehow, even when the facts are there and crystal clear, the ANC cannot find it in itself to hold its members to account.
Ma'am, the DA is set to withhold its support from the budget vote process, in particular when it comes to the human settlements in this department. Won't it negatively impact South Africans if the DA says that it's acting in support?
This is Minister Nkabane, which is higher education, and we will definitely oppose her budget vote. When we used to be in opposition, we used to often oppose budget votes to express our grave dissatisfaction with the performance of the minister. Just because we are now in the government of national unity does not imply that we must accept this kind of blatant infringement of the law. And we will continue to hold the government to account, especially if the president will not do so. And we are going to be there in Parliament explaining what an outrageous defiance of the law the minister has put up here, and why under those circumstances it is impossible for us to support her budget vote.
It's about the budget vote.
Sorry, this lady's had her hand up for a while.
It's about the budget vote. What are we going to see in the NCOP this afternoon? Like, we're going to practically.
The Deputy Chief Whip's terrain.
So I think it's important for us to understand that we've taken a stance that we cannot accept giving corrupt accused ministers money and coffers of the state that are responsible to deliver services to the Republic of South Africa to people that already have squandered things through being implicated in corruption and VBS. We've seen now the Minister of Higher Education lying to Parliament and misleading Parliament. And this afternoon will basically outline why it's important for us to hold her accountable and make sure that the people of South Africa get a competent minister that is going to be clean and give clean, accountable governance to the people of South Africa, to ensure that the students behind me have proper, good student accommodation. They've got access to a functional national student financial aid scheme that has been basically terrible at distributing money to students that are of desperate need, and ultimately making sure that we run a clean, accountable department where people deliver services, where skills are given to young people, where people are not appointed to SETA boards because they are ANC cadre deployed. And those will be outlined this afternoon in the National Council of Provinces, and later on obviously in the National Assembly in the following week. So that's what you should be expecting this afternoon, and basically what should be done in higher education to make sure that we've got a functional department that is going to be there for students, and ultimately making sure that they've got a good future ahead of them based on service delivery that is given to them in those various entities in the Department of Higher Education.
We've got a question online here. Can we just take the question online?
Why is the DA's fight on corruption important?
Why is the DA's fight on corruption important? Won't you just move to the side, because this television guy keeps on asking you to, because he can't see. Okay.
But then there's this one here as well.
We've got two. You've got to stand just behind each other. Okay.
I wonder if you could maybe just move this. Then you'll be more in line of both of them,
Sure.
I think.
Are we all now choreographed correctly? Okay. Why is the DA's fight against corruption important? That's a very important question. Corruption takes state resources and uses it to enrich a few, and does not use it for the purposes for which it was intended. Corruption undermines a functional state and makes sure that it isn't a capable state that serves the people. Corruption is a cancer that has destroyed many, many countries. Corruption is the basis for state capture. It works like this. Power is centralized in the hands of a few, as it has been in the hands of the ANC for 30 years. Then you have cadre deployment, as we're seeing here, followed inevitably by corruption, and then you end up with the criminal captured state. That is the progression, inevitably and always. And that is the tragedy of South Africa in a sentence. So we fought corruption from the beginning. We fought cadre deployment from the beginning. We've opposed state capture with everything we've had, and we've exposed the criminal state. And we are going to continue to do that, whether we are in government or not, because South Africa cannot succeed with a corrupt government.
Ma'am, the DA also said that a motion of no confidence in the president is an option should the DA decide to up the ante. What is the prospects of success if that is a measure that you are considering?
Well, we certainly have a motion of no confidence against the President up our sleeve, but we always say that our action must be commensurate to the infringement. Taking a motion of no confidence is the nuclear option because we will bring the government down most likely. We counted heads and we think that we're going to have 196 or 197 votes out of 400 for a motion of no confidence. That's a lot of votes. The ANC has never once yet in the history of our parliament got all its parliamentarians into the House, even with a 3-line whip. So the question remains, will they have a full caucus in the House? I very much doubt it. And then certainly if it's a secret ballot, that motion of no confidence would carry. But that would bring the government down, and then you have to think very carefully. Is the infringement commensurate with the action? And are there other mechanisms? For example, on the Expropriation Act, we're confident we will win in court, for example. With that, we could have done the same thing, but we did win in court. So before we bring the government down, we try every other avenue, because that's what a responsible partner does. An irresponsible partner behaves like the ANC and carries on with corruption as if there's no tomorrow. A responsible partner, like the DA, finds every single way of combating that and exposing that. And we hold the card of bringing down the government, but we will not use it lightly, and we will use it when all other options have failed.
Helen, your decision to pull out of the national dialogue, are you not concerned of what consequences that might have, for example, John Steenhuisen, who's part of that IMC, that may be seen as insubordination?
I can tell you that that's another part of our fight against corruption, pulling out of the national dialogue. Firstly, in terms of the statement of intent that we both signed, the ANC and the DA, this was supposed to have been done in a collaborative manner. It wasn't. It was a unilateral action, again, by the ANC. Then 740 million rand has been budgeted for that. Now that is just an outrage. And we all know that that is another way of tapping into state resources to give the contracts and the tenders to ANC cadres for the transport, for the catering, for the tents, for everything else. It'll all enrich a few people, probably with a few backhanders into the bargain. And then we know that every single time there's...
All right, you've been listening there to the Democratic Alliance's Federal Council Chair, Helen Zille, ahead of the organization opening criminal charges or laying criminal charges against Higher Education Minister. That's Nobuhle Nkabane. It's all got to do, of course, with the appointment of SETA board chairs, or some people say with the firing of Andrew Whitfield. I suppose it depends where you start. But nonetheless, this is certainly seen as yet more signs of cracks within the government of national unity, with Helen Zille ironically saying that they're going to have to continue with their role as the opposition, even from inside the government. You make of that what you will, all right? What she's also mentioned is that they'll definitely oppose the budget vote that is going to be tabled, I beg your pardon, by the Higher Education Minister. It's just gone 10 o'clock. Let's continue listening in to Helen Zille outside the Cape Town Police Station.
More wisdom, if we go to the ground, what they're going to get is an access to convince people to vote ANC in the 2026 election. There's going to be lots of food dished out, lots of T-shirts dished out. We know exactly how it works.
But you did originally support the idea.
Originally we said we would participate until we learned of the 740 million rand price tag. And until I took Fikile Mbalula through the 3 letters I've written to him about how we should set up this dialogue. I haven't had a reply to one of those letters. I wrote my first letter to Fikile in July last year. I wrote the second to him in October last year. I wrote the third letter to him earlier this year. You can do what you like with the ANC. They don't come to meetings on time, they don't answer their letters, they don't abide by the documents they've signed. They act as if they've got an overwhelming majority of the votes in South Africa and don't have to worry about anyone else and can do what they like, including with public money. And we are saying this is going to stop.
But consequences for your ministers if you pull out of this dialogue?
Well, bring it on. What's he going to do to us? For standing up against corruption? Bring it on.
Thank you so much. Just One more.
On the statement of intent on the GNU, what must happen for it to collapse? If, for instance, I'm trying to get a situation whereby you don't support these budget votes, what must happen for the current GNU to collapse so that there's a new one in place?
Well, the next GNU can only happen after the next election. So, the statement of intent the ANC has ignored since the beginning. Frankly, I don't know how many people in the ANC have even read it. The ANC has ignored every single clause, every one, in the statement of intent, and they did it from day one. And they even tried to get around the most important clause by putting up this thing called the clearinghouse mechanism, which proved to be a complete and manipulative farce. So they have ignored every single sentence in the statement of intent. They have violated it again and again, and they have ignored it, and they behave as if they're in government alone.
Helen Zille, the Democratic Alliance's Federal Council Chair, speaking outside the Cape Town Police Station. That's where the organization is planning to open a criminal case against Higher Education Minister Nobuhle Nkabane. And tell you what, if you've ever doubted it, the gloves are definitely off. Helen Zille saying that the ANC should bring it on if there are going to be consequences for any of their other ministers who are currently within the executive. She's accused the ANC of breaking every single clause of the statement of intent, which is this document, if you like, that's meant to be some kind of guiding light for this unprecedented national government coalition. She's also said that the clearinghouse mechanism, which is meant to be a body, if you like, led, I think, by the deputy president to adjudicate through any kind of disagreements, Helen Zille slamming that mechanism as nothing but a complete farce. What happens next, I suppose, in some ways is in the ANC's court. The DA once again also mentioning that they have to continue with their role as the opposition, even within the Government of National Unity Coalition. She says they will definitely oppose the budget vote that will be tabled by Nobuhle Nkabane, who's meant to table her budget before the National Council of Provinces today. Yet another day in politics in South Africa. We'll watch the space and get you a sense of what happens next, in a context, by the way, where the criminal charges will actually be laid by Karabo Khakau, who we told has only just landed in Cape Town and is currently making her way to that police station.